Hello and good afternoon. I think everyone is joining in. Jenna, I just want to double check people are being invited in from we're undoing the opening the doors, digital doors. Perfect.
Everyone's coming in.
Awesome. So welcome everyone as you enter. We're going to get going in just a few minutes. We would invite people to have their cameras on, which I'll speak to in just a minute as we get into the session, but welcome and we'll get going in just a few minutes. So thank you, Novelet. Yeah, one of my announcements is thanking the wizardry of magical pizza through the interwebs. If we haven't found a good use for the internet, getting pizza to people in disparate places using a web-based platform is definitely it. So thank you very much, ServiceNow, for organizing that. Why don't we get started? We've got a fairly sort of busy session today, and we've got some people joining in, and we'll be able to catch people up as we go. By way of introduction, my name is David Singh. I'm a partner here at CSPN, and this is one of our it's a great workshop to go through. So if you haven't gone through it, get excited. It's meant to be very discussion based. We're going to learn about some theory and best practices, but really get into us connecting within the community and learning from each other as well. As we get kicked off, I wanted to say thank you very much to our sponsor, ServiceNow. You should have received a link to get some pizza. If hopefully you were more diligent than I was at actually executing on that link, as I'm sad this morning, I'm just stuck with leftover Halloween candy, which apparently we only had 10 visitors at our house, but I had prepared for 150. So I'm well stocked leftover Halloween candy. So in terms of today's session, just a few ground rules as we get going. Abbas, if you could just go through all three bullets, that'd be great. We would love for everyone to have their video on as we get going. We've got a few of the folks that are around the room, which we'll introduce as we get going. We're really trying to have people ask questions, participate, use the chat. You're also able to, as we get into the small group sessions, just speak up and be ready for unmute. As much as we know the work world continues while we're in these sessions, if you can try to focus in the sessions and be present, that's really great. Part of as we get into the breakout rooms, it's about us sharing our various perspectives from our organizations, and it's not just us presenting to you. It's with a group from that perspective. So those are some of our ground rules. In addition to that, as always with CSPN events, let's have some fun and take some notes so you can take action on the information that we get going. I already introduced myself, but I'm pleased to introduce Abbas Rangwala, who is a senior solutions consultant, director of solutions consulting at ServiceNow, which really means he's really good at listening to your challenges and finding ways to make your team more productive, and specifically within the ServiceNow suite, but has had a storied and a great career so far in lots of different areas of the technology ecosystem, and brings just a great perspective. So with that, Abbas, I'd love to just turn it over to you and get going. I'll be back in and talking about some logistics in a few minutes, but really over to Abbas and take it on.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Abbas Rangwala, as David mentioned, and really I've spent my life in customer service. I've been an agent on the phone, I've been a team lead, I've built contact centers, I've been the business buyer for contact centers, and over the last 9 months or so, I've been selling to contact centers. So really, really excited about being here and talking to you all about how do you assess the maturity of your customer service organization? How do you sort of grade yourself a little bit, so to speak, on your customer journey and where you are? And that's something that I always struggled with, and I hope today gives you a framework to do that as well. But before we get started with that, a little bit of fun. So I'm sure you all recognize this picture. Maybe it became a meme 5 years back. I don't know if you know the story behind this, but there was a young couple that was about to get married, and the bride, the mother of the bride, sort of takes this picture and sends it to her daughter, the bride, saying that this is the dress I'm going to wear on the wedding. And the bride goes, okay, it looks good, but why are you wearing blue and black? And the mother goes, what do you mean blue and black? It's white and gold. And of course, they disagree on the color of the dress based on the picture. And like all normal people do, I guess nowadays, to settle the argument, the daughter posted this on Facebook and asked her friends to sort of weigh in on what's the color of the dress. And the friends disagreed, and this suddenly became this viral meme which was getting at its peak around 14,000 views per second. So let me pause a little bit. And in the chat, if you don't mind, what color do you see? Is this white and gold, or is this black and blue? White and gold? Black and blue? White and gold? Wow. So that's just amazing. Like every time I ask this question and I get different answers, and it's just amazing to see that. What's really interesting is it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter what's the color. The perception that you have is your reality. And as we are going through this exercise as well, what I want you to think about is your perception. We'll be answering a bunch of questions around your customer service organization, your customer service processes, tools. And it's not, don't overthink it. Don't think about, oh, I need data, or I need, answers from someone else. What's your perception? Because at the end of the day, perception is reality. And it's not what you think of your systems or what your company thinks of their systems. It's what your customers think about the systems, how they perceive it, or it's what your agents think about the system and how they perceive it. So as we walk through this, you'll see that as well. And I'll come back to this rest towards the end to tell you one other interesting story. So if you look at the agenda for today, we went through the introductions. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about customer experience and how we see customer experience today. We'll then break out into different rooms where you'll get the chance to sort of fill in the sheet, and we'll share the sheet in the chat soon, so you can download it. You have a local copy, and we'll go through that exercise. There are 4 pillars that we'll go through. And then once you've done that, we'll all come back together. We'll talk a little bit about how we can interpret the results that we see, and then talk about next steps. Please keep this interactive. It's not us talking, it's us listening. It's all of us sort of learning from each other. You're in this amazing place where you're with people who are on similar journeys as you are as well. So especially in the breakout rooms, take advantage of that to network with each other and collaborate as well. So let's start with customer experience today. And this is one of my favorite slides. I've been using it for a while, and it's so true today as well. The 3 things which are happening. One is technology is getting more and more complex, right? As things are getting smarter, it's also getting more and more complex. So technology on one hand is getting more and more complex. The amount of information that's being generated is growing exponentially. I see these stats that says 90% of the world's data was created in the last 3 years. So think about the amount of information, especially when you start factoring in IoT and sensors. Cars today have more than 1,500 sensors in each car. So the amount of information we have access to is growing exponentially. And of course, customer expectations are skyrocketing. Like if you think we have our high expectations, wait till the next generation comes around and the expectations that they have. So technology is getting more complex. Information is growing rapidly. Expectations are sky high. And yet the human ability to learn is pretty much constant. I'm pretty much the same person I was 10 years back, though if you ask my wife, maybe I'm a little slower actually. But really, there is this big gap around how we can adapt as humans and where the expectations are. And how do we fulfill that gap, and who bears the burden of that gap? We'll talk about that a little bit as we go through these slides. So as I said, customers today, they just expect stuff to work, right? I want to buy a ticket, I just expect it to be there. I want to do something, I just expect it to work. I bought a product, I expect that software to work. They just want things to work. They'll be okay because everything's not perfect. Things will break down. Customers will be okay if things don't work, as long as we provide them with fast, permanent, quick resolutions. True story, happened to me 2 weeks back. I had to call an airline. I won't take the name here to change my ticket. The IVR told me in the most polite voice possible, your call's really important to me. Please stay on the line. Your estimated wait time is 15 hours, 25 minutes. 15 hours and 25 minutes. My mind was blown, right? So that was a terrible customer experience for me. And I won't forgive that airline very easily for that. So, but why? Why is it that way? So a couple of things. First is there's limited or non-existent self-service. What I wanted to do, if I could have done it by myself, I would have, but I couldn't, so I had to call in. If I'm frustrated with those 15 hours, imagine the agents at the other end and the kind of pressure they are in when they're seeing their queue lengths, or the time that people are on hold. So the agents are getting overwhelmed, and finally the service processes themselves are broken. So it's not easy, right? It's not easy to deliver good, fast service, and this costs organization. So again, I'll ask you to put it in the chat. What percentage of customers you think would abandon a favorite brand? So not just any brand, you have a favorite brand. What percentage of customers do you think will abandon a favorite brand after one single bad experience? What percentage? What do you think is the percent? 45, 40, 15? 32%, right? So yes, depends on the cost of switching as well. But almost a third of your customers would abandon a favorite brand or seriously think about abandoning your brand after one single bad experience. And if you think about 2 bad service experience, 6 out of 10. So 60% of your customers are going to leave. So there is a real price to be paid for bad customer service. On the other end of the spectrum, there is a reward for good service as well. So I'll ask you this question again. What percentage of customers will spend more after they get good customer service? Any thoughts? 60, 10, 50%? Not bad. 17, almost 70%. So 69% of customers will actually pay you more if you're offering good customer service. And you all know this, but 9 out of 10 customers will share their experiences. I just shared my airline experience with you. 9 out of 10 customers will share their service experiences with others, whether these are good experiences or whether these are bad experiences. So there is real ROI, there are real costs, there's real benefit to looking after and making sure your customer service is as good as it needs to be. The problem is a lot of companies are stuck in this old work model, right? There's work, there are the people who do work, and in between there's this crazy spider web of emails and calls and putting up your hands and going and talking and following up, and it's a nightmare. And what this does, it leads to reduced CSAT from the customer's perspective. It's higher costs because you're not taking advantage of operational efficiencies and lost revenue. So the way we think about customer services, there are 3 big pillars you need to think about. The first one is engagement. How are you engaging with your customers? What is that engagement like? How do they come to you? And unfortunately, a lot of times when we say customer service, people just think about customer engagement. Engagement is important, but it's just one of the 3 pillars, and you'll see what the other 2 pillars are in a second. So engagement is important. I need to be able to engage with you in whatever channel I choose to, and that's really important. But what's equally, or I would argue even more important, is your service operations. Once I have reached out to you, are you able to solve the issue quickly? If it's a one and done, that's okay. But especially if it's a complex issue which needs to go into your back office, into your middle office, into other organizations, how good are you at solving that? And that's what we call service operations. And of course, the third pillar is if you have a mobile force, if you have a field service organization, the field service piece as well. So when you look at engagement, when you look at service operations, and when you look at field service, that's the trifecta of customer service. And all of this holistically addresses your customer service issue. So that was my state of the nation around customer experience. Let's go to the actual exercise that we have itself. So we shared the Excel sheet in the chat. Please download it if you haven't already. But why do this maturity assessment, right? Like what will we get? So as we saw, the changing expectations, our users, our customers, even our agents demand a lot more from us right now. And what this will give you is, it'll give you an opportunity to assess your strengths and your weaknesses in your current organization and across 4 pillars. And I'll talk to those 4 pillars in a minute. Now remember, it's a journey. It's not a destination, right? So there's no finishing, there's no finishing line. But no matter where you are in the journey, what's important is sort of understanding where you are and where you need to go. So the 4 key pillars we'll sort of touch on today are customer experience, people and culture, processes and workflow, and systems and tools. There are 10 questions on each of these 4. So there are 40 questions in all in that Excel spreadsheet, and Jenna just shared it again as well. We'll go through those. Don't worry, you'll get all the instructions around how to go through it in the breakout rooms as well. But this will give you a holistic view and an overall customer maturity score. and you'll get a maturity score in each of these 4 pillars as well. So how do you score? So it's pretty straightforward. For each question, you give an answer between 0 and 4. 0 means, hey, this is not available. So I'll take an example. For example, there's a question on knowledge management. So if you don't have knowledge, you don't have any knowledge management practice today, you say and you don't have any plans to offer it in the next 12 months, you'll mark yourself as a 0. And the other end of the spectrum is, if you have that available today, it's fully deployed, it's fully optimized, you're happy with it, you'd give yourself a 4. Now, there may be some areas on the worksheet which are not applicable to you. If it's not applicable, just ignore that. Don't give it a 0, because 0 means something. 0 means, yes, it's applicable, I just don't have it today and I don't have a plan to do it in the next 12 months. Does that make sense, everyone? Any questions? Awesome. So a couple of other recommendations as well. Number one is, I know some of you sort of come from the same company, but score as an individual. So don't be sort of slacking or teaming or whatever and try to discuss answers amongst yourselves. Take this as an individual exercise and score yourself. Again, it's not about what's the real reality. It's your perception of what you think that reality is. And then the second piece is, if your business is heterogeneous and you have multiple departments, multiple companies, don't do pillar 1 for department 1, pillar 2 for department 2, pillar 3 for department 3. Do all the 4 pillars for the same department. You have this sheet with you. If you wanted to do it for a separate department, you can do this exercise again. And that time you do all 4 pillars for that next department, and so on and so forth. So the last thing over here before I pause, I'll pause for questions and give it back to David, is remember, you're with people who are on a similar journey, right? Like, pick each other's brains, take advantage of this time to collaborate, to network, and to ask questions that you may have as well. So with that, David, I'll pass it back to you, and then we can go into the breakout rooms.
Thanks, Abbas. I think you've covered all the logistics. I think the key thing is just, try to be engaging. If there's any issues with I'm just looking at the chat right now, in the with the Excel sheet. So maybe as a backup, Jenna, what we can do is just email that out to everyone while we go into the breakout rooms.
Right now.
Perfect. And if not, all the hosts in the various rooms will be in there. So looking forward to seeing people after the breakout rooms. So Jen, I'll leave it to you to push us into the various rooms.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We'll give everyone 10 to 15 seconds to come back, and then we'll get started again. I see some smiling faces, which is awesome. I hope everyone had fun doing this exercise, and I hope there were moments where they were like, oh, wow, yeah, maybe I should think of that, which is the whole purpose, right? And the idea behind this is, it's your perception. So it doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be, 100% accurate. It's what's your perception. And my hope is, once you go back, you'll probably share it with some of your colleagues and get their perception. And maybe it's the same, and maybe it's totally different. But that's a great discussion to have as well. So David, are we good to go? Everyone's back?
Yes, let's get going. And this is great.
Awesome. All right. So let's talk about, how do you interpret your scores, right? And I hope, you had some of those discussions within the groups as well. But as you can see, you were asked to score between 0 and 4. And depending on where you are, you're either reacting, you're adopting, you're leveraging, or you're leading. And I'll talk a little bit about what these 4 words mean and what are the next steps based on those 4 words. But typically, you would see this bell curve, this bell distribution around where people are in their journey. And what I'll do is I'll share some of the previous results we've had from our previous participants in these kind of workshops as well, just to give you a sense of where people are, and maybe you can see where you are and then take a decision based on that. So if you look at those 4 levels, if you're reacting, unfortunately, you're low on your customer service maturity, right? What that likely means is you're firefighting, you're sort of just dealing with it day to day, and you're this car which is going on but not really getting time to stop for gas, right? So you're sort of in firefighting mode, you're just reacting to what's happening, and there's a lot of burden that you're likely placing on your agents versus having processes and systems and tools to work with it. So what if a lot of your scores are in 0 or 1, what I would encourage you is to think about what you need is a broad-based transformation, right? It's not just a department, likely if that's where your scores are, it's the organization. It's every single department within your organization which is dealing with customer service. You need to rethink how you're doing business, whether it's when I pass some work to you, how quickly you can do that. Do I have visibility into that? So it's a broad-based transformation. If you're adopting, that means if your maturity is between 1 and 2, then you've started a little bit of that transformation, but you're still sort of early in that journey. And now what you need to think about is what are the broad areas. It's not a company-wide or a departmental or area-wide transformation, but what are those areas? What are those sort of smaller things that I need to focus on and put additional time and investment in? If you're leveraging, which means you scored between 2 and 3, you likely have done that transformation already. And now it's not about filling that big swimming pool with water, it's about filling smaller buckets, right? So what are the small targeted gaps that I have, and how do I close those gaps? And if you're leading, which is if you're between 3 and 4, congratulations, you are at a high level of customer maturity, right? You are amongst the leaders in customer service, customer experience maturity. And now it's just fine tuning. It's keep listening to your customers, keep listening to your agents, and fine tune those smaller things and keep leveraging the investments that you've already made. So if you look at the last sheet, which was sheet number 5, you would see the maturity level that you have mapped out. And again, this is for you to keep, it's your perception. I understand that you may not have had all the information that you need, get it. But it's a start. It's a way for you to just quickly get a sense of where you are and then decide where you want to go. So to give you a baseline around how we've seen previous participants score. And again, if you think of the bell curve, I'll show you the bell curve as well. On customer experience, usually people are between 1 and 3, right? So they're in the middle, which is where you would normally expect people to be. But on people and culture, they're skewed positively. So a lot more people are on the higher end of the spectrum for people and culture. Even in the breakout room that I was in, a lot of comments around, oh, I thought we should have done higher, or we would have done better on the people and culture piece. So typically, even respondents have sort of scored themselves a little higher on people and culture. Versus processes and workflows and systems and tools, where typically it's negatively skewed. So there are more people who are between that 0 and 2 range versus the higher numbers. And again, if you look at the overall customer maturity, it's a nice bell curve. So if you look at the curves here, if you look at the overall customer maturity, it's following that bell curve. Customer experience is also following it. People and culture is skewed positively, which is a good thing. But then processes and workflows and system and tools are skewed negatively. And if this is what's happening, what's the likely thing this is telling you is you're putting a lot more burden on your people than you're putting on your systems and your tools. And you need to shift that burden. You need to take it away from your people. We spoke about this in our breakout room as well. We say, hey, everyone talks about, my superstar agents and, how they went above and beyond and they sort of, saved the day with all the back-breaking work that they do. Great, but they don't need to do that. Right? You should have the right processes and systems so that they don't have to work crazy hours. They don't have to go through that stress. They don't have to beg, borrow from different departments to get the work done. So keep this with you. Go through it again. If you did it for your department, do it for other departments as well that you may be responsible for. Another way of looking at it, and this sort of gives me a little bit of hope as well. If you look at the participants, and we did this across 600 executives, we did this survey, typically they were low. But once they started putting a plan, over 3 years, on average, they achieved a 24% increase. So it doesn't really matter where you are, right? We said that it's not a destination, it's the journey. It doesn't matter where you are. No matter where you are, if you start today, and if you have a plan for the next 3 years, you would see an increase, and it's a sizable increase of up to 24%, which is pretty awesome. So to recap on why we do this, as we spoke about, expectations are changing. Some companies have already used, they've used their transformation budget, that they got because of the pandemic to put, new systems in place. So some players are already ahead. How are you doing against them? And then it gave you a chance to assess yourself. in the 4 categories that we spoke of. Final reminder, it's a journey, not a destination. So what could you do next? So 4 things over here. One is, what's the concrete next steps you can take based on what you've done here today, based on the score that you've given yourself? How can you change some of the metrics and measures? Like even in our breakout room, we had this comment that, hey, maybe we have the data, but we're not really using that data. We're not really driving insight from that data. And I've heard this from past participants where they sometimes don't even have that data. We don't really know how long a case takes to close. We don't really know how many times it needs to hop from one person to the other for it to close. Like we don't even have that data. So if you don't have that data, if you cannot measure something, you cannot manage it, right? If you cannot measure something, you cannot improve it. So measurement and getting the right KPIs is so important. So think about how you can get that as well. And then did anything surprise you, right? Like, did you score really well on something? Did you score really low on something? Was there anything that surprised you in your own assessment? And who are the other people that you can share this with in the organization? As I said, the sheet is for you to keep, so you can share it with them and sort of get their perspective as well. And really interesting, if you're both doing the same department and you completely disagree, that's a great discussion to have with that person and talk about why you think it's so awesome and I think it's so bad, and just chat about that. So having said that, I'll sort of bring you back to this. It's not the reality, right? It's not whether the dress is white or gold or black or blue. And just if you're curious, the dress was actually blue and black. That was the real color of the dress. But I can't believe that, because even now, as I'm looking at it, it's white and gold to my eyes. So it's my perception. My perception is my reality. Think about your customer's perception of you, of your company, of your department. Think about your agent's perception, and that's what's really important. And what the other thing about perception is, there's some things you can control and there's some things you cannot control. But the things that you can control, you should control, right? The things that you can do something about, you should be doing something about. And the real winner of the story is not the dress, not the way it went viral, but the company that actually manufactured the dress. So as soon as this went viral, the amount of orders they were sort of seeing exploded. But to their credit, they were able to sort of turn around their production schedule. They were able to sort of sort out their supply chain issues so they get the material. And they made like a whack load of dresses and made more money in a few months than they would have made in a few years. So I think we all aspire to be that agile company which can adapt to the new market realities. And on that note of hope and happiness, David, I'll pass it back to you to bring us home.
Thanks so much, Abbas. And it's funny, at the beginning, I was really sure it was the white. And then at the end, I think I saw like in the corner of the black. So I've changed my mind in this presentation. But in terms of, is there one more slide, Abbas, just on the next steps? Perfect. So very operationally, you'll get an email at the end of this. We'll give all the materials again shared, as well as a link to a survey. We'd love your feedback as always. We want to try and make these as continue to make them as best as possible. And really the key thing with the document that we shared is it is a tool for you to have further discussions. And it's really meant to, what we've seen in the past with having run a similar kind of sessions in the past, is it just starts a conversation. And it's not about being perfect. It's not about being absolutely 100% accurate, but about starting that conversation internally. And I think it's a great framework to be able to do that, to build that case or share that progress that you're making as a team. The other thing that we offer is, and again, this is from a CSPN perspective, and we could loop in the ServiceNow team as well. I know there's a lot of folks looking to know, how might this work from a ServiceNow perspective, or how do I think about this assessment from against other peers? We're happy to have debrief conversations individually with the organizations saying, hey, I'm stuck on reporting, or I don't understand how this technology piece might work. Happy to have that conversation and just give a little bit more information or insight particular to your situation. So if you didn't get all of that through in the session today, we're happy to take additional sessions as we follow up. But as we come to a close and just sort of nearing the 2:30 mark, I wanted to say thank you very much to ServiceNow. Abbas, thank you so much for pulling this together. The ServiceNow team for joining, Jessica for hosting one of the sessions as well, Jenna for organizing everything as she normally always does, and everyone, thank you very much for taking the time to come to enjoy some pizza while we did a little learning as well. So we'll look forward to being in touch on email. And in the meantime, have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Good session.